Good morning and welcome to The Extra on KRDO News Radio. Joining us, Catherine Hammond from Hammond Law Group. It is great to see you. How are you?
I am doing really well, thanks. How are you, Renae?
Doing good. I'm glad we're getting some warmer weather.
No kidding.
Right? Did you like all the snow?
I loved all the snow.
It's beautiful.
I love it occasionally.
But when it sticks around, it's not normal for here.
Right. It's a little odd.
It is a little odd. And it will be getting more, it sounds like, this weekend. Go figure. Yeah. But we still have to get through March, April, May. So we can do it.
We can do it.
We can totally do it. And I am so excited to talk with you today, as we always do. And today we're talking about the top 8 mistakes people make in planning their estates. And you actually call them the 8 deadly mistakes.
Right.
That's a big word.
It's a really big word, especially when we're talking about planning for our death.
Right.
There are a growing number of people who are realizing that they need to get their estate plan done.
Right.
Or get it updated if they have one from many years ago. And there are people who go out and either use an online program or hire an attorney to take care of their estate plan and think that they have everything taken care of. And yet they have some little things that either weren't taken care of to begin with or need to be checked in on periodically over time.
Like updated.
Yeah. That can be a disaster and cause the whole estate plan to not work exactly the way that they wanted it to.
So it could be the littlest little thing.
It can be a really little thing.
Trigger a big mess.
Exactly.
Okay.
For one example of a little thing that's not even on our list here. Well, we'll talk about funding, but so many people that have a revocable living trust, a very common planning tool these days. So many people have a revocable living trust. They go buy a new house or they refinance their house and they take the house out of the trust
right
at that time, or they buy a new house and never put it into the trust. Now, the entire purpose of the living trust is not going to be fulfilled just because their house didn't get in there.
Was not put in that
little tiny detail that makes a really big difference.
Absolutely. So let's start with what you classify as the first deadly mistake for estate planning.
Yes. That would be not keeping up with changes in the law.
Okay, so give some examples.
So one of them is tax laws.
Yes, as we know, there was a big shift.
Right, and people are finding that out as they file their income tax returns this year. Things are very different. In the estate planning world, it's largely, there are gift tax issues and also estate tax issues that might affect your estate plan.
Okay.
Today, the law allows each of us an estate tax exemption. We can pass on to the next generation up to just over $11 million.
Okay.
That's a good amount of money that we can pass tax-free. However, in 2025, that law changes substantially. Now, currently, it's planned to go down to $5 million. It's possible that it could end up different from that. We could end up with an estate tax exemption of $1 million per person again. The way that affects people's estate plans is that determines the amount of money you can pass tax-free when you die.
Okay.
If you're a married couple, no matter who you are, you want to pass as much tax-free as you possibly can.
Right.
None of us wants to pay extra in taxes.
Right.
For a married couple, there are easy ways to double the amount of money that you can pass tax-free. Today, you may not need to worry about that if you don't have $11 million, but a few years from now, you may need to worry about that. So keeping on top of the tax laws is really important.
Okay.
There are also estate administration laws that determine exactly how things work when we die. For example, in Colorado right now, when somebody dies and we're doing a probate, we have to post a notice to creditors, and we have to wait 4 months to let them
reply.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so little details like that can change over time. We need to know what are the right rules and exactly how things are going to go.
Okay.
There are state-specific laws. There are federal laws. And also we come up with new planning strategies all the time.
And so the best way to plan
Exactly.
So is that always changing, like frequently, or is it?
It's always changing. For example, the ability to put trust-like protections on retirement plans. If you have retirement plans and a good amount of money in there, and you don't want your children's husbands to end up with half of the retirement plans after you're gone, we can do something we call divorce protection. That's a newer technique within the last really 20 years is when attorneys started doing that, and a lot of attorneys still don't do that.
Okay.
And we can include the retirement plans that aren't part of a typical estate plan into that protection. So there are all kinds of things that we can do. We just come up with new and better ways to do things all the time.
And hopefully more efficient, too.
That's it. Exactly.
Right? Because, I mean, it's pretty in-depth. Estate planning, obviously.
And we've talked about that a lot. You've been through the loss of parents.
Yep.
I just recently lost my dad.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. There's so much to deal with emotionally, and there's so much to deal with practically. Making it as easy and efficient as possible is one of the greatest gifts you can give your family.
Absolutely. You don't want to be thinking about this when everything else is going on. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break. And by the way, you may be listening going, oh my gosh, I have a question for Catherine. She brought up something and it was like, ding. Well, here's how you can reach out. You can go to KRDO.com, look under the radio tab, and you'll see Ask the Estate Attorney. And that sends your question directly to Catherine. And it's a great way to because, sometimes they hear something and then they're like, I have to ask that question. They forget. So you can go do that if you hear something and you think, I have a question about that.
Absolutely.
Just reach out to Catherine.
We'd love to help.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll talk more about the big deadly mistakes people make with their estate plans next on The Extra on KRDO News Radio. And welcome back to The Extra on KRDO News Radio. Today we're talking with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group, and we're talking about the 8 deadly mistakes people make with their estate plans. And this next one, Catherine, we kind of touched on earlier. Not updating your estate plan. Because big things happen. Like you brought up, you purchased a new house.
Right.
And guess what? That house did not get put in. Everything got busy. You got moving, whatever. And that house did not get put in the estate plan.
Yep. And there are a lot of other things that may have changed in your world that would also require a change in your estate plan. So one of them is, let's say that you've named a personal representative, an executor for your estate, maybe an agent under your power of attorney, maybe a trustee on your trust.
Right.
And those people are no longer the appropriate people to be doing that. Let's say you've had a rift with one of them. You're not speaking anymore. Always good to come in and check on those things. I have a client who came in last year, adult child, well into their adulthood, who had developed an opioid addiction. No longer the appropriate person.
Right.
So good for us to keep checking in on those.
That's
You might have children or other beneficiaries who have matured since you set up your estate plan. Maybe you want to change things so that they get their inheritance earlier. Or maybe, God forbid, they have a drug addiction or something like that now, and you need to change things so that it's more restrictive and they don't get a bunch of money all at once that's just going to send them down the wrong road.
Right.
I had a woman come in years ago who was really upset. Her mom had just passed away and she brought in her will. And she said, what do I do? My mom's will says that 50% of her estate goes to this church. But she left this church 12 years ago and she hates this church.
No.
I don't want to give them any money.
Oh, no.
But she didn't have a choice.
Because she never updated her mom,
Exactly.
never updated her.
And if you leave a church, you're not thinking about your estate plan. You're thinking about, how do I find a new church?
Right.
So that's what us attorneys are for. And a good attorney is going to have you come back in on a regular basis to check in on these things. Maybe you have a child who has gotten married or divorced and things need to change. Mm-hmm. Maybe they've had children and now you want to leave something directly to their children. Or maybe your entire estate plan needs to be adjusted because you, when you first set it up, had a very small estate and then you received an inheritance from your rich uncle, or just your situation has improved.
Right.
And now we might need to do some tax planning or some other things. Or maybe things have gone the other direction And now we need to look at potentially something like Medicaid planning.
So basically, it's like keep in mind, whenever a major life change happens, and maybe not that major, just keep that in the back of your mind.
Exactly.
I need to update and keep everything up to date.
Yes. And I would say, no matter what, even if you think nothing has changed, go back into your estate planning attorney at least every 3 years.
Good idea.
Just sit down and do a little check-in.
Right.
Because a good attorney is going to know what questions to ask and how to get to the issues that would show us what needs to change.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk really quick before we have to do a news break, but you do address nursing home costs in this, because is that something, I mean, that can be a big surprise to people, can it?
It really can. Huge, as in $90-some thousand a year.
Wow.
If you end up needing nursing home care. And so some people have addressed that. Maybe they have long-term care insurance. Maybe they have Medicaid planning within their estate plan. A lot of people don't. Most people don't.
So not addressing it, having it in your estate plan is a big yikes.
Exactly. And so the older you get, the more important it is and the more urgent it is that you talk to a qualified elder law attorney about things like Medicaid planning, or at least how am I going to pay for a nursing home if I end up needing professional care. Now, my dad stayed in his home, even though he had significant medical issues, and had in-home caregivers for the last 10 years or so. And that all was paid for with long-term care insurance, which was a great relief to my stepmom.
Absolutely. So that definitely has to be a part of that estate plan.
Absolutely.
So if it's not, then maybe meet with someone and get that added.
Yep.
Because it could, it could put really some families in a not good spot financially.
Right. There are families who end up having to file for bankruptcy or just get completely impoverished. You have to be down to your last $2,000 before you qualify for Medicaid, unless you've done some planning.
Wow. Okay, let's take a quick news break, and when we come back, we'll have more of the 8 deadly mistakes people make with their estate plans with Catherine Hammond next on the Extra on KRDO News Radio. And welcome back to the Extra on KRDO News Radio. Today we're talking with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group. It's great to see you.
Always so good to be with you.
And we're talking about the 8 deadly mistakes people make with their estate plans. And we've covered just a quick recap, not keeping up with changes in laws and stuff like that, not updating the plan to reflect changes in your life. It could be anything from house purchase, or maybe a falling out with a loved one, or a falling back in with a loved one.
Right.
Is that a thing, a falling back in? We're making it
absolutely. We have it happen all the time.
Or you haven't planned for nursing home costs, which I'm sure a lot of people get tripped up with.
Yes.
I bet that's a big one. And then the interesting one is the funding not maintained or updated. That's number 4. So explain that.
So this applies to people who have a revocable living trust.
Okay.
With a living trust, it's an empty theoretical box that's designed just to hold all of your assets. And so when you set it up, we put in your bank accounts and your house and anything else that you have other than your retirement plans. And you go on about your business. You are the trustee or manager of your trust, so nothing changes. And then when you become incapacitated or when you pass away, because everything is in this nice, neat little package and you've named a successor trustee, they just slide into that position and they take care of everything when you pass away without having to go through probate.
Okay.
So the entire key to making this living trust work is having all of your assets owned by the trust. So when we set it up, when we transfer in your house, we take it out of your name and put it into your name as trustee of your trust. Okay. So it's still yours. You still have full control, but that little wording change makes it be in the trust. And that's what allows your trustee to take care of it without probate when you die. A lot of people either never transfer all of their assets into their trust. Their attorney doesn't help them do that. Or they transfer everything in and then later they buy a new house, or they open a new bank account, or they buy a new stock or bond or whatever, and they don't put it in their trust. Mm. And now they have, let's say you have the best living trust on the face of the planet. It still doesn't do you any good if you don't have your assets in it when something happens to you. So that funding, having everything owned by your trust, is key to making your living trust work.
Okay. And if something's out there lingering, doesn't help.
Yep.
Doesn't.
So really good to check in, I'd say once a year, to make sure that everything you own, other than retirement plans, is owned by your trust.
Okay. Okay. That was very good. Okay. Now let's talk about number 5, assets purchased that bypass your estate plan. Is that kind of the same as we were kind of talking about just now, or is it different?
It's similar.
Similar. Okay.
Very similar. So it's acquiring assets without putting them into the name of your trust. And so there's joint tenancy, which a lot of people, if you're married, that's kind of the default. Of course, the real estate agent is going to have the title company set it up in joint tenancy. If you have a living trust, then the joint tenancy is going to bypass your estate plan. That's especially an issue. Well, it's an issue for a lot of different reasons. One situation where that's an issue is if you're in a blended family.
Yes.
So you want to give your kids something, but you don't want your new spouse out on the street the day that you die.
Right.
Having it in joint tenancy gives it all to your new spouse, none of it to your children. So important to look at that. Also, life insurance. Life insurance isn't automatically part of the rest of your estate plan.
Oh, it's not.
You have your beneficiary designation on there,
okay,
who you probably named whenever you got the life insurance. And you can say in your will or in your living trust, I want all of my stuff to go to Joe. But if you named Sally as the beneficiary on your life insurance, it's still going to go to Sally, not to Joe, who you now want to receive everything.
So you have to go in and update everything. So it
exactly.
says if you change and you have to make each has to be named
exactly.
specifically.
And it's exactly the same with annuities and IRAs.
Is it?
Also. So you have to update your individual beneficiaries on every single one of those things.
So I bet a lot of people get caught up possibly in court over stuff like that, right? Because it says, well, but the will says, but the life insurance policy says. Can that trip people up?
Maybe fortunately, maybe unfortunately, no, that doesn't go to court because there's no legal issue. If you named Sally as your life insurance beneficiary, Joe doesn't get to make a claim. And there are famous cases about this where it was clearly a mistake and clearly the person who died wanted to do something else, but the money ends up going to the wrong person because they never updated their beneficiaries.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So the concept that's important for people to understand is that an estate plan is not just the legal documents that say will or trust and power of attorney and medical director.
That's not the whole of your estate plan.
Exactly. Okay. The estate plan is all of the planning to make all of the pieces go well. And those documents are just a small part of it.
Right. That's kind of glues it together.
Right.
But
so
everything else is in there.
A good estate planning attorney is going to help you look at all of those things and plan for the entirety of the situation and then also draft you some documents.
Right. That go into the estate plan.
Exactly.
Now, this is an interesting one. We are on number 6 of the 8 deadly mistakes people make when they put together their estate plans. Not as assets that are not suitable for your family goals. We've talked about family goals before.
Yeah.
And just review for everybody what you mean when you say family goals.
So different people have different priorities. And for some people, making sure that they have security now is more important than having long-term maximum income or long-term maximum return on your investment.
Right.
For some people, it's the opposite. There is the long-term care planning. How are we going to pay for that if we need that? There are a lot of different factors that go into exactly where and how all of your money should be situated. Most people who come into my office have a hodgepodge of investments. They have this that they bought from their Edward Jones guy who wonderfully, came through the neighborhood and said hello. And then they have something else from work and maybe a different setup for their investments for their retirement plans. And then they have something else that they inherited. And they have this hodgepodge that's none of it has been evaluated in terms of where they're trying to go in life financially and what's most important to them.
Right.
So make sure that you have your financial plan reviewed, have your investments reviewed. I recommend by somebody else.
By a financial planner.
Exactly.
Right.
And I always recommend working with someone who is a fiduciary, which means their duty is to you to make sure that they're doing what's in your best interest. There are a lot of folks who are required to do what's in the best interest of the company they work for, not in your best interest.
Right.
So understand that difference between a fiduciary and a non-fiduciary if you have a financial advisor.
Right. Okay, perfect. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to get to number 7 and 8 of the 8 deadly mistakes people make with estate planning with Catherine Hammond from Hammond Law Group. Next. And welcome back to The Extra. We're talking with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group, and today we're talking about the 8 deadly mistakes people make with their estate plans. And I know we've kind of gone through these quickly, Catherine, but like we were kind of talking about, one little mistake can cascade into like bigger problems.
Right.
And that's why
having things just not go the way you want at all.
Exactly. It just kind of starts, and domino effect, it just kind of keeps going. So that's why it's important to hear all of this. And I love number 7. We've talked about this numerous times because it's so important.
Right.
You need to discuss with your family. Nobody likes talking about death, right?
Nobody likes talking about death.
But guess what? We're all going to die.
Right.
We're not getting out of this life alive. I'm just saying, right?
Yeah, and people still want to live in ignorance of that fact.
Yeah.
But talking through with your family about your plan and their duties is incredibly helpful.
Right.
So, do they know what their roles are within your estate plan? Did you name your daughter as your executor? Did you name your son to make your medical decisions? Let them know what their roles are. And if you die or become disabled, what they're supposed to do, the basics of what to do.
Because that can get really confusing. And then you have some people trying to, I don't want to call it a power struggle, but it can happen.
I will call it a power struggle.
Okay. I'll let you call it a power
right.
struggle, but it does become a power struggle.
Oh my gosh, it happens
all the time.
Yeah, more frequently than people could even imagine.
Yeah.
And even while people are still living, we have kids calling trying to get their parents' documents changed, and it's really crazy. So
that's unbelievable.
Yeah, I wish I could write a book someday, but
maybe you should. Yeah. About the craziest things that
exactly.
Okay. But also, discussing another hard one. And it's not just about death, but if you become disabled,
right? And especially if there are healthcare decisions that need to be made. Do you want to have a hip replacement if you're 85 and have cancer? Or should we skip the hip replacement?
Right.
All kinds of little decisions. What makes life meaningful to you is, I think, the most important thing to discuss with your family so that they can filter whatever kinds of decisions need to be made.
That could be thrown their way. Say it's an emergency, and that, like, do you have a living will?
Yep.
That says this is how long, and then after that, that kind of thing. Okay. Selecting somebody, right, and this is a big one, to make those healthcare decisions for you if you become incapacitated, right? Like,
that's vital.
You cannot make your decisions for yourself. Who are you going to pick to make those decisions for you? And discussing it with them.
And making sure that it's choosing somebody that you trust to carry out your wishes.
And they clearly understand it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And somebody who will stand up for your wishes. It has to be somebody with a backbone.
Right. Because you could have family members and no, you can't do that. That's
exactly.
not what they wanted,
or the
right?
doctors might be pressuring them to do something. I've heard that multiple times from my clients where, let's say it's 2 spouses and something happens to one of them and the doctors are saying one thing and the healthy spouse knows that spouse wanted something else. And the doctors really are firm and strong, and we tend to trust doctors and respect what they say. And if doctor says we need to disconnect from life support, then a spouse might feel really pressured to do that. And I've had situations where doctors said that there's no hope, you need to disconnect from life support. and spouse and I had a conversation about what their spouse really wanted, and they ended up recovering from the situation that the doctors said was not curable.
That's incredible.
So, right.
Now, this one is very hard because a lot of people have gone through this, and we can kind of put some of these together. Location of important documents.
Yeah.
If people don't know that can create problems.
Right.
Or having a backup, right?
Are they in your house in the filing cabinet? Are they in your fireproof safe? Are they in a safe deposit box?
Correct.
Let somebody know.
Let somebody know. And then also, what are your wishes after you're gone?
Right.
Or do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? Is there a funeral? Is there a memorial where your ashes are blown out in a cannon? Like, I'm just trying to come up with, right? Like,
Yep.
Let the wishes be known.
Exactly. And those you need to let somebody know ahead of time, because in the hours after you pass away, your family has to make a lot of decisions.
Yeah.
And if they don't know those things already, they're going to be just making it up, and they may come across your written wishes later.
Right.
After they've already had the service that wasn't what you wanted.
Absolutely. Like, okay, we completely did that wrong. And before we have to jump to 8, personal property, if it's not already in your will,
right.
But all the stuff, the material things, what's going to happen with that?
Your jewelry.
There we go again with battle starting, right?
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Families fight over the personal property at least as often as they fight over money.
Right. Okay, and number 8, to wrap up the top 8, plan does not reflect your family values or life lessons. We've kind of touched on this throughout all the other ones.
Right.
Right.
So have you thought through, let's say that you have young adult children. Let's say your kids are 25 and 23. A lot of parents, just by default, leave everything 50-50 to their 2 kids. The thing about a 23 or 25-year-old is if they were to get a chunk of money in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, even $100,000, if they get that all at once, they've never had that much money. They typically will spend it before they even have a chance to think about it. Some people have, let's say if you have a total estate of $2 million with your retirement plans and everything, you leave that to 2 kids, each one gets $1 million. You might have a child who says, I really don't feel like working for the next 5 years.
Right.
Most of my clients say it's really important that my children still have a good work ethic. So we want to think through all of your values as we're thinking about how your money goes to your beneficiaries.
Right.
Should we stagger it out a bit so that they don't get it all and spend it all before they have a chance to think about it? Do we want to make sure they don't get pushed down the road with drugs or quit their jobs, or do we want to incentivize them to do certain things?
To get their inheritance.
Right.
That's
right.
a great idea. And again, this is just the tip of the iceberg, but you can always reach out to Catherine. And in fact, you have upcoming workshops. You have monthly. And this is kind of help people get on the road to, maybe they're not starting in their estate or they're just in the beginning stages and they have questions. So when are these upcoming workshops?
So we have workshops next week for people who want to come and hear just about estate planning, wills versus trusts and probate. What on earth is it? Do you need to worry about it? Next Tuesday, March 5 at 2:30 in the afternoon and 6:30 in the evening.
Okay.
And Saturday, March 9th. At 10 o'clock in the morning, all here in Colorado Springs.
And they can go get registered on your website.
On our website, coloradoestateplan.com.
Yeah.
Or you can call our office, 719-520-1474.
Catherine, you're awesome. Thank you so much for all those amazing tips and information. And then tomorrow on The Extra, always great seeing you. And tomorrow on The Extra, we're going to continue our series with the Pikes Peak Workforce Center, help you find a job tomorrow. We're talking about interviewing. We could spend 5 shows talking about it, but we only have one. So that's tomorrow on The Extra on KRDO News Radio.